So Nintendo has decided they want to charge $70 for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom as a standard price. It's not for a special edition. It's for the standard copy of the game. There's an article recently on Bonding in the Comics talking about how they believe it's justified due to the quality of the experience. They said, we do this on a case by case basis because they were immediately asked after that, is this going to be a standard thing? And they said, no, we don't think so. Or they use language to basically leave it open. My thought on this is that they shouldn't do this, obviously. I didn't think the first game was worth full retail. I did not like Breath of the Wild. I've never been shy about that. I didn't enjoy Breath of the Wild. The breakable weapons thing was completely unjustifiable to me, and it ruined that combat experience, which could have been decent, because I think the blueprint for what was there for combat was decent. But because you had weapons that broke so much, it left you so helpless and having to stockpile and scavenge way more than I wanted to. They were forcing certain gameplay elements that were very annoying, in my opinion. They were forcing you to play certain ways that were annoying, as opposed to the structure of Zelda before, which felt very much so balanced, sort of the Ocarina of Time, Wind Waker style. Not to say those games didn't have annoyances, but they were a lot easier to deal with than having your weapons break like toothpicks and not being able to climb mountains because you don't have enough stamina and you have to constantly do these annoying trials to get more stamina. You have to choose between stamina and health, and having this open sandbox but not having a really effective way to traverse it because you can only have horses in certain circumstances. Trying to go for more realism in a fantasy setting. It just really ruined the Zelda experience for me, which is why I was so happy to get Legend of Zelda A Link Between Worlds, or not A Link Between Worlds, which I do love. That is my favorite 2D Zelda, but Link's Awakening, when they announced that remake, that was great. I still haven't completely finished it. I'm on the very last dungeon. I've been putting it down so many times in favor of other stuff. I need to go back and just finish it. But Tears of the Kingdom to me is not worth it, especially if they keep that damage system. Now, there seems to be an indication that maybe there's some sort of repair feature function thing, but at this point, I don't like this style of game. I've come to that conclusion after having played it day one, because I got it when the Switch came out. It was one of the only games available with the Switch when the Switch came out, and it was one of the only things I played, and I was struggling to find justification to play it. The most fun that I had with Breath of the Wild was cooking and hunting, but that got boring, so I just stopped. And then whenever I tried to actually progress and do things, it just became more frustration than it was worth. It didn't feel worth it to learn the game's systems. It was just an overwhelmingly frustrating experience. And even my friend, who was a dyed-in-the-wool Zelda fan, told me at one point, he's like, I just had to quit because I was dying too much. So it wasn't enjoyable for me. I know a lot of other people felt the same, despite the overwhelming amount of praise that Breath of the Wild received. It just wasn't worth the frustration and just the weird design choices that that game went for, how much new it tries to do at once. And Tears of the Kingdom looks like an asset flip to me. And it feels like what they did with Majora's Mask, where they added a few tiny elements. But I didn't like Majora's Mask either, no matter what I did with that game. The time limit. When you put restrictions on players, I really just don't like that, where there weren't any before. It's one thing if you've got a new series and that's just the natural way it does it. But if you've got a series that didn't put restrictions on you before, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, you go from no breakable weapons to breakable weapons. And I know some of you are going to say, but there was durability introduced in Skyward Sword. Yeah, and I didn't think that was a good element in that either. Nor did I think the motion controls being just the standard was good. They sort of fixed that in the re-release, but I still didn't bother with it because it's awkward the way that they came up with a compromise for Switch Lite owners, which I am one. I have a regular Switch, but it has to be docked because it's got a broken cooling fan, and the cooler needs to be on sitting on the docked console, so it only works when it's docked. All of that aside, I don't like the fact that they made that radical of a change to Zelda. It didn't work for me. It worked for plenty of other people, plenty of gaming journalism and outlets, and everybody who hyped that game to infinity and back, and you know, everybody who talks about how much they love Zelda, they're diehard Zelda fans. But what gets to me is that this is an extraordinarily predatory move. And people are going to justify this, but Nintendo's only doing this because they know people are going to pay for it. They know Zelda fans will buy the game no matter what. If they have to take out a loan, if they have to sell their own kidneys, they'll buy it. They have to sell their firstborn child, they'll probably buy it. They're that fanatical. So they'll charge you 10 extra bucks, and people will say, well, there's nothing I can do about it anyway. I either deprive myself of the game or I just don't buy it on some sort of misguided principle. But it's not a misguided principle. When a game does bad, let's take the recent Saints Row. When a game does bad, they reduce it to price just to get rid of it. Then people can pay next to nothing for it. When people decide collectively, more and more, no, I'm not going to pay the price that they're giving me, then the retailers are forced to adjust prices. If more people said, I'm canceling my pre-orders and I'm not doing this, the entire response would be, okay, well, we're going to lower the price. We're going to make it more fair for people because we want to sell this game after all. But people don't see it this way, or they don't care. And so they end up paying full price, and then Nintendo goes, well, I guess people are willing to pay $70 for games no matter what, so here it goes. I don't believe them when they say, oh, no, that's not going to be standard going forward. We're going to do it on a case-by-case basis. That means they're going to do it, depending on how well this goes. And this is going to sell well. If the first game is any indication, it's going to sell very well. They're going to make that a standard across the board. Make no mistake about it. And it's not good, in my opinion. It's not good at all. I did not like Breath of the Wild, and I don't think that a sequel that looks largely the same is going to be worth it to me. I'm not saying there's not going to be any new features or changes. Obviously, there are. Otherwise, it would be a total ripoff, especially at $70. But to me, it's not worth it because I just didn't have a good experience. And to the people who are hoping for an improved experience with Tears of the Kingdom, I don't think you're going to get it. Based on the development history, based on the visuals of the game, it's just an asset flip with more additions. The game's being stretched out because originally it was going to be DLC. It was going to be an addition to what was already there. So they've taken that addition, they've made an entire sequel out of it. That's what Majora's Mask was. Majora's Mask was supposed to be an add-on for the Nintendo 64 disk drive. You remember that thing? Nintendo 64 disk drive was supposed to use Majora's Mask as an add-on to the cartridge of Ocarina of Time. But that whole thing got scrapped. And so they made it its own game, and it got rushed in development. And now it's one of the most beloved Zelda games, if for no other reason than its story. I think gameplay-wise, it slightly improves Ocarina's combat in some ways, but gameplay-wise, it's just you've got that burden of time and having to reset time and the weird save system, which they sort of addressed in the 3DS version, but it's still awkward and cumbersome, and it's a slapdash game. As far as actual game mechanics are concerned, I can appreciate the story, which most people do. It is a genuinely compelling story, but as far as gameplay is concerned, it just doesn't do anything for me. And Breath of the Wild equally doesn't do anything for me gameplay-wise, despite having a somewhat compelling story. I think Tears of the Kingdom will have a somewhat compelling story. It looks like they might introduce Ganondorf or his ancestor, who I can't remember from Skyward Sword. I don't know, somebody with red hair. So there looks like there's going to be elements of it that are interesting, but Nintendo, knowing that this is going to be a high-selling game, so we're gonna go up to the price of our competitors, and we're gonna take away the edge that we had over our competitors because of greed or whatever justification. It's really unfortunate to me. It's really unfortunate to me that consumers don't have, or at least I should say enough consumers don't have the self-control to say, I'm not going to buy this thing until it gets discounted. I'm not going to wait and see how it turns out. Because it's easy to just act on impulse with hype and the hype that is generated. You know, it's very easy to do that. It's a lot harder to say, no, I'm not going to give in to the hype. I'm not going to be a guy who streams this day one. I'm going to be patient with it. Or gal who streams it day one. I'm going to be patient. I'm going to wait. And I'm going to see what glitches this game has, to see how people are receiving it, see what people like, what they dislike, if they made any genuine improvements to this formula, if it's just more of the same, if it's even worth that $70. Because there are going to be people who are early adopters no matter what. Somebody put it well on Bounding into Comics in that comment section. They said, you're basically paying that price for the experience of first day, because people who can't afford it are going to wait for a sale, whatever sale they can find. More people need to wait for sales. People feel like if they don't wait for sales, they're missing out on this core experience, or they've already been waiting long because of all the delays. This game had a lot of delays. I don't know if it had as many as the first game, but it certainly has had delays, which is not a good sign to me because the first game didn't turn out good despite all of its delays, and it had numerous delays. It's almost had cyberpunk levels of delays. So I don't think it's worth it, and I don't think this is justified. I think Nintendo should have kept it at standard retail. But they're like, oh, we think this is going to be a tremendous game. Based on the trailer, I don't see much of a change. Even on a technical level, it doesn't appear to run that much better than Breath of the Wild. Hopefully I'm wrong and it's worth people's money. But I just don't see it. I don't see the worth, and I don't see how this is a good move going forward, because it just shows Nintendo as being as predatory as any other AAA gaming studio. They're not trying to save people money. In a time when banks are literally collapsing, they're announcing price increases instead of decreases. That's not good. There's no justification of that. Don't you want to save money and still get what you want? Oh, but I can't because they're the overlords that set the prices. No, you're the consumer. You let a combination of hype and peer pressure drive you. Some of you people are my age. You're in your 30s. You should know better. But you let your fandom, your hype of this game, stop your critical thinking skills and your ability to think critically and still plan out to get what you want, but not give in to this corporate greed and to this manipulation of you. They're manipulating you with this game. They're manipulating your desire for this game and taking advantage of the fact that you're at the mercy of your desire to buy this game. So you'll pay that extra $10 so you can have it now. You can't wait any longer. They're taking advantage of you, and that's just scummy. I've defended Nintendo on a lot of things. I love Nintendo. My name is Super Koopa, for goodness sakes. But I'm not defending this one. There's no justification. Just saying the game is worth that in quality, that's the weakest justification I've ever heard for a price increase in a time when people can barely afford and are having to take loans out to get groceries, to pay gas, to pay their essential bills. The gaming industry has gotten more greedy, and it's gonna collapse the AAA industry eventually because people won't have that disposable income. They won't be able to take out loans to get things that they can't afford. They'll have to slash prices, but the diehards will do whatever. All the hype being built up around this game. I know some people have expressed concerns. I think Game Explained did a roundtable where they were talking about their hype and their concerns, so it was more of a balanced discussion. But people need to be more careful because Nintendo is definitely looking to take advantage of your hype as other companies are. And now that we know they do that, we've got to show more self-control. Plain and simple. Anyways, let me know what you think about this price increase. Do you think it's worth it? Do you think it's not worth it? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. This has been Super Koopa with another Koopa Talks. I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.